Hello America, it's Gavin Syme. It's that time of year where we ring bells and we give gifts and we talk about love and peace and Jesus and compassion. But over here in Grant County, we're turmoiled with anger, with bitterness, and with dissension. But it's not just out here in Washington that this is happening. It's a reflection of what's happening all over America and all over the world. I was talking to my dad earlier and we were discussing the difference between tyranny and compassion. Tyranny is the force of government using law to coerce and extort and to hurt others. Compassion is caring about people's plight, wanting to help them in their suffering, regardless of what role you have to the situation, and just caring for your fellow man. Now, I was driving to work a week ago, and there was a bad accident on the highway just outside of Ephrata. And there was multiple vehicles involved, and there was no emergency crews on the scene yet. So a few of us were there, and we were trying to help the injured. We were trying to do the best we could as others were on the phone frantically telling emergency services to hurry up. They were about 1 mile away, and it took 15 to 20 minutes for them to arrive on this horrible scene. Now, when they did get there, most of them went right to work and started helping people, which was great. But one or two of the firemen were worked up about something. In fact, one of them I approached right off to try and point out a few things since I had been there for some time, and he immediately grabbed a hold of me and got hostile with me because he knew who I was and he didn't like me. Now, what appeared to be that same fireman had another incident a little while later, after I had backed off and was just observing and let people do their jobs like most of us were doing. The son of one of the people that was in the accident came onto the scene, and his mom was lying broken in the road, and he came over and he was going over to one of the vehicles, and a fireman assumed that he was going to attack the driver of the other vehicle. Now, there's no evidence of this that anyone can tell, and the fireman blocked his path, and this young man, Omar, who was understandably under duress and extremely agitated, not knowing the condition of his mother and was extremely worked up, tried to get past the fireman. Now, instead of just calming the situation down, the fireman tried to stop him again. And then this young man saw the other vehicle. And as it turned out, his fiance's sisters were in the other vehicle. So we had people from both vehicles who were all connected in this same accident. And so he saw his fiancée down by that car, and he went to run down to the other car, and the fireman chased him and tackled him in the snow, and they rolled down the embankment. Now, nobody was hurt. And it could have been just that. You had an upset man who maybe overreacted a little bit and should have been a little more calm, and you had a fireman who could also have been more calm and calmed the situation rather than made it more intense. But instead of saying, hey, let's just all calm down, let's all calm down and help the people that are injured, local officials took Omar off to jail. And now Grant County officials and Garth Dano is filing felony charges against this poor young man for no injuries, no real crime committed. His only crime being upset in the situation when he thought his mom was laying dying on the road. Now, this makes you think, as we talk about all the debate, and some of us come at it from different perspectives. I was standing there and I watched this, and there's numerous other witnesses that were there too. And some people think that Omar overreacted, and some people think that the fireman overreacted. But we need to ask ourselves a question about compassion. In what world do we want a government who tries to turn people's lives upside down, who takes suffering families and makes their suffering worse, who takes the small indiscretions and the tiniest infractions of the law and turns them into great violations, felonies, jail, prison, the inability to get a job properly or care for your family? What kind of a people are we? If we are joyful in the turning of others' lives upside down for the smallest of infractions. You see, is it not our job to look to our neighbor and say, how can I help my neighbor? How can I love my neighbor? And so I would ask this community of Grant County, do you want a 20-year-old young man and his family to be made to suffer more than they did in the accident? Do you want them to be in courts and in jail and persecuted by the state when no crime occurred? Do you want them to use the full coercive power of the state to try and prove that a crime did occur, to spend massive amounts of taxpayer money to try and take a poor young man who was emotional and upset and try and make him look like a criminal? And I would ask Prosecutor Garth Dano, I would ask our judges and our courts and our community, regardless of whether you agree with the positions I take, or whether you agree with the positions over here, or where you come down on it, whether you're the firemen or the police, do we want to persecute our neighbor? Do we want our neighbor to suffer? Or do we want to be looking for ways that we can help our neighbor, that we can love our neighbor as ourselves? We need to ask ourselves when accidents happen, when people make mistakes. Of course, there should be consequences when real crimes are committed, and those consequences should be just and fair in their compassion. But we need to ask ourselves, if we were that person, or if that person was our son, how would we feel about it? We need to be looking at our neighbor as if it was our own family. We need to start watching out for each other. And we need to start holding government accountable to that standard. You see, law goes back to what Jesus told us when he said the law is summed up in loving God and loving your neighbor as yourself. We can't love our neighbor as ourselves when we take joy in their suffering and in their punishment because we say, oh, they broke the law. And we can't have law in a nation when a government's foundation is based on the codes and statutes of men that violate the very principle of law, which goes back to loving your neighbor and extends in our constitutions and in our founding documents to life, liberty, and property. And so ask yourself when you read the next news story, when you see what's happening to your neighbor. In this case, the local news took the government side of the story without doing any research, and they even admitted this, and they took the police reports, and they took the charges, and they just ran a story, and it was as if the man was guilty before anyone even knew what was happening. And people were jumping on board and saying, well, there's no excuse for what he did, even though they didn't see it, and they haven't seen the evidence, and they didn't see the stories. We need to stop. Not just at Christmas time, but every day, and we need to start asking ourselves, am I loving my neighbor as myself? Am I filled with compassion, or am I filled with hate? Am I enjoying the suffering of others because it makes me feel better about my own failings, or am I trying to help others and deliver them from evil? So ask Prosecutor Garth Dano, ask the officials in your community, ask them to stop persecuting our neighbors. Garth Dano, I'm asking you, drop these frivolous, silly charges. We don't need our neighbors to be suffering for nothing in a world where there's so much real suffering. You don't need to put people in jail at every corner and every turn to have done your job. Let's start loving our neighbor as ourselves.